Welcome, listeners, to episode 24 of Future Secured. Today, we're excited to have special guest Reece Appleton. Now, he's the Regional Director for Australia and New Zealand at Huntress Labs. So, Reece brings a wealth of experience in addressing the unique cybersecurity challenges faced by small to medium enterprises. And Huntress Labs specialises in providing simplified and effective security solutions, making cybersecurity accessible for businesses that often lack in-house expertise. Really excited to dive into this conversation today. So thank you for joining me again, Jason. Thank you for joining us, Reece. And I'll throw over to you, Jason, for our first question.
Thank you, Tommy. That was the most professional intro I think I've ever heard in the whole time we've done 24 episodes, mate. That was fantastic. No, honestly, that was. I told you to be a one-take wonder.
I can learn.
Keep that in. We're not editing that out. That was unbelievable, mate. Reece, look, this is. I always look forward to this one because, as you know, mad for protecting small to medium-sized enterprise. You know, where 97.8% of the Australian businesses here are considered to be small to medium-sized enterprises, which is usually comprising of 20 people or less, and usually at the bottom end of that. So, and I think really where we sort of met, even though we sort of knew each other a bit beforehand, was through the Dynamic Standards International, or the SMB 1001. With Huntress and stuff. But for the people who don't know you, can you just give us a bit of a background on sort of probably go whichever order you want, sort of forward or back from here, to sort of just give us a bit of an idea on your journey and sort of how you got to be on this fantastic podcast today.
Yeah, for sure. Probably not the typical route into cybersecurity, although perhaps
no one has one.
Yeah.
No one has one. There is no normal route into it,
mate. I started out with a law degree, and then very quickly realised that being a lawyer was not for me. Perhaps many lawyers also that don't want to become a lawyer, sort of fell into sales. And my first sales role was at an MSP, or managed service provider, in the UK, and then from there moved into sort of MSP vendor land, so products and solutions that support MSPs delivery into their customers, and have been sort of in that managed services, IT services space for the last 12 or so years. Throughout that time, various sales and sales leadership roles, and have sort of sold and helped MSPs deliver cybersecurity solutions around business continuity, disaster recovery, infrastructure monitoring, SaaS application backup, those sorts of things. And however, it's only been since my move to Huntress, which is coming on 2.5 years now, I think, is the first organization that is, I think, truly a cybersecurity organization, in that they sort of, as an organization, we live and breathe cybersecurity. So this would be my first full cybersecurity company role, I would suggest.
Yeah. And just on that, just going back a step, what did you do in particular in law? Was there a specialty that you were doing, and where did you see the application where that's helped on the cyber front? Because cyber law as a specialty is very, very specialised, and there's not many people doing it at the moment. But from what you've done legally, where's that sort of help? Because I find people, especially have accounting or legal background, it does open up a lot of opportunity, I think, for you. And I think the legal aspect, depending on what law it was, probably criminal law in your case, mate.
But, because of the dodgy accent, right?
Yeah, 33 and a third, all that sort of thing, you know what I mean? So yeah, just what was the legal aspect, and then sort of how have you seen application? How's it helped with what you're doing in cyber?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, my degree was in sort of multiple areas of law, so contract law, employment law, property law. I actually did my thesis in sport and European law, which and then worked for a year in a law practice that specialised primarily in charity law, and just being a lawyer, that just wasn't for me. And then in terms of how that's helped, I think just the ability to be pretty logical in thinking and application, but also being able to understand to a degree some of the legal legislation that comes out and surrounds cybersecurity in general. Obviously, I'm not a lawyer by trade. I don't specialize in cybersecurity law, so I wouldn't dare say I do. But it certainly helps me understand, probably a bit better than some of the people perhaps listening to this podcast.
Fantastic. And look, just with the particular area of expertise around sales and stuff like that,
Mm,
I'd love to know, how you go, because look, one of the big challenges personally was, I've spent most of my career full time employed. And so, I had this real used car salesman kind of persona in my head where I really didn't realize that at the end of the day, what it is, it's about finding a customer who has a real need that you've got
mm,
a good solution for, and then you're working in a partnership.
yeah.
So, I mean, I struggle with that. How do you find that process these days? And, how do you go about building those relationships with your clients?
There's so many different lenses, I think, to answer that question. I think, look, sales is ultimately about finding a solution to a problem. And I think it's really the salesperson's role to help the customer understand their problem and the degree to which it is a problem for their organization or for them personally. Um, I, I, I think the challenge with cyber security in particular is certainly for MSSPs or managed service providers that are trying to sell to that SME segment is that it's still very much seen as a technical IT problem or product or solution
Hmm.
rather than a whole business problem. And so I think some of the challenges that we see, particularly for partners, is that they go in and try and sell a technical control and don't really focus on the business impact or risk or outcome that business actually cares about.
Mm.
So I think that's probably the big challenge when it comes to cybersecurity sales today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's a confusing space, isn't it? Isn't it, Tommy? I mean, like there is so many
Mm,
solutions out there. Everyone claiming to have a silver bullet.
yeah.
I mean, it's confusing at the top end for people who have got budget. And we sort of talked off the top about the small to medium sized enterprise. What chance do they have, or where's their opportunity? To actually at least start the journey. And I think that's where you guys are sort of specializing. I think making a real difference is that having some clean metrics or some clean ways that actually businesses can look at cyber risk or where they can start is a big thing. And I just don't think enough people are doing it at the moment.
Mm, mm. And I think just to confirm as well, from our lens of small to medium business might be slightly different to us as an American global organization. So we kind of
Absolutely, yeah,
view that SME segment, small to mid-size enterprise.
yep,
So when
yep,
people hear SME, they tend to just think on small businesses. But actually, if you look at organizations outside of that 1% or 2% of those large enterprises, even organizations that have 500 staff or 1,000 staff
mm,
often don't have the security
correct,
experts or
mm,
capabilities in-house to
mm.
fully understand and protect their organization. So it's a challenge not just for the 5-man fish and chip shop or the 20-person accounting practice, but also for larger organizations outside that 1% as well.
Yeah, and we're less than 10% really of the American size, market wise.
Yeah,
So when you are talking in US context, you can expand those numbers out massively. From
yeah,
still similar percentages, but yeah, as you say, that mid market is a lot bigger and a lot different. The way it is spread in the US as well. So
yeah.
Yeah, so and we've started to pull a couple of these threads already. So, small to medium enterprises, MSPs, the challenges that they're facing when you're
Mm,
kind of interacting, where are they when they come to you? And is culture, because this comes up, over and
mm,
over again, is about, I think the business and the CEOs and founders that we speak to that are doing the best are people that are reshaping the culture of organizations, and then their service or software is following on from that. So,
mm,
where are you seeing these kind of real challenges in the space in Australia and New Zealand?
yeah, I think you're spot on, Tom. I think it is a not just Australia, but I think globally, in that SME segment in particular, it is a cultural issue. It's still seen as an IT challenge as opposed to a whole of organization initiative. And even those that do take cybersecurity seriously or do treat it as a business initiative, they have no idea where to start. Often they'll engage with an MSP or MSSP, which comes with its own challenges, which I'm sure we'll touch on. But I think as well, you mentioned before, Jason, obviously the DSI SMB 1001 standard. I think if we take that to one side, there's no sort of framework or set of standards that's really built or fit for purpose for most organizations. And so it's very difficult for, even if there is a culture of cyber within an organization, it's like, where do we start? What asset classes do we protect? How do we protect? Do we focus on protection versus detection response or recovery? Like, where do we invest in what? And so I think that's a big challenge today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
I think, and that's it, isn't it? I think cyber, and being such a fast moving and fast paced changing environment, is also the challenge, right? So,
Yeah.
and just touching on that, not to sort of push this as being the SMB 1001 show, but it is, a dynamic standard, obviously, which is, adjusting and moving with that as well. And also, I think having the mix of all the other standards, ISO 27001 and this framework, here in Australia, where it was originally made for, like the Essential 8, but taking sort of the greatest hits of it and what's going to be most applicable for a business in that size that you talk about is key as well. The Essential 8 is hard enough for top end customers to get in play,
Yeah.
right? Let alone a small or medium sized enterprise, near on impossible. So yeah, I think this is good, and I think we need to change all the languaging and the messaging around it just to make it more palatable.
And look, Jason certainly hasn't paid me to keep mentioning the SMB 1001, but
Not yet.
not yet. But like it's such a good step in the right direction, I think, because it is a progressive standard as well. So you can start at at one level and have a cyber improvement plan across a period of time to get to level 2, 3, 4, 5. I think, to your point, Jason, organizations might get to level 1 of Essential 8 maturity. Level 2 is too cost prohibitive, or too much impact to productivity, and so like where do you go from there? And so I think SMB 1001 is a good, like I said, a good step in the right direction.
Yeah, checks in the mail.
Excellent influencer status.
Yeah.
Look, when we were chatting on email, one of the things that we were talking about was that kind of there's some collaboration barriers between the SMEs and the MSPs and stuff like that you're seeing out there. So, if you could highlight some of them for us, and maybe even if you've kind of like thought through the process of what we could do to kind of improve some of these areas.
Yeah, I think we touched on it before. I think again, it's sort of making it a whole of business initiative and not a technical problem. Obviously, most organizations that outsource to an MSP or MSSP see them as their IT provider, and so naturally, I think them delivering cybersecurity solutions or services is seen as an IT. It's part of their IT cost center, right? So, and to that, which we mentioned before, partners will still go in and talk technical controls to directors that have no understanding of what they're talking about. You go in and start talking about application control, whatever it is, and the directors sort of eyes glaze over, and there's no real impact. So I think the issue is really around communication and like I said, making it a part of the organization's culture. I think with the MSP space in particular, it's also every MSP or MSSP's approach to cybersecurity is different. It's not we're not all aligned into the same framework. It's not a regulated industry for the most part, and so there are security first MSPs that deliver good cybersecurity solutions. And unfortunately, there are those that provide products and services that tick a box on a cyber insurance form. And on paper, it's it might look the same level of cyber resilience, but actually it's chalk and cheese. And so I don't know how to solve for the latter. I think for small mid-sized organizations, understanding the framework or sets of standards that an MSP or MSSP sort of measures or aligns to is important.
Unless Jason's got something, I'd like to kind of take a steer now into 2025 and kind of the evolving cyber threats. What do you see now? What do you think is going to happen over this year? And are we going to be racing to play catch up, as usual, with all of this kind of vulnerability management and all the kind of patching and everything that needs to go on to kind of keep as many Australians safe as possible?
Yeah, again, I think the persistent challenge is that cultural piece. Going back, I'm sure you guys remember this. Going back to 2017, I think it was the WannaCry cyber incident, which was massive, caused the global economy billions. I remember thinking to myself at that time, this is the wake up call that partners and small to mid-sized organizations need. 7 years later, of course, that's not the case. And then the Optus and Medibank breaches happened, and it seemed to be a wake up call for enterprise and critical infrastructure, but no one else really. And so I think the biggest challenge in 2025 and continued and beyond is going to be rebuilding that culture of cyber within Australia, which I don't have the answer to. I think from a like a threat lens, identity threats we're seeing a lot of, and that continue to rise. Business email compromise, I think, was the number one risk to businesses according to the ACSC in their report last year. Business email compromise, generally is a result of a breached or a compromised identity. So I think that's something that businesses should be very aware of, considering that with the work from home environment that we have, organizations are not always using, or people are not using, their accessing their Microsoft 365 environment from their phone, from their iPad, from all sorts of devices that might be outside of their corporate network. So that's something to consider. And then lastly, so I'm just waffling here, but then lastly, I think particularly within the SME segment, again, I think there was a report by Microsoft. I think a third, or it might have been 2/3 of small to mid-sized enterprises use an MS, like a managed service provider or an MSSP to deliver services. And I think the risk is that there are some vendors coming into the space now, which are kind of general IT vendors, have a couple of cybersecurity products which are not particularly well regarded,
Suitable.
and well regarded or suitable, and now they're calling themselves a cybersecurity company, and it can be appealing for managed service or managed service security service providers, sorry, because they're selling these products and services for peanuts, and so there's an increase in their margin, but obviously there's a reduction in security capability there. So I think that's something that as an industry we need to get in front of. But yeah, I would say those kind of 3 points are what's top of mind for me for 2025.
So what I'm hearing there, Tom, and you probably heard the same thing, is what Reece is suggesting is that we need more cyber attacks, is what I think he's saying to move the needle and get things going. Is that he talks about WannaCry, he talks Medibank, and it's been a long time in between drinks. He wants another cyber attack. The CrowdStrike little kerfuffle last year was not good enough for him. He wants a proper full-blown attack on the country or something like that. So.
I don't know how many more cyber attacks we need. That's the issue.
Well, it seems like we need a lot, right? No, but when you think about it, all those things you mentioned from that Optus one, Medibank, Latitude, etc., happening, especially in such a close period, and with the new government, Claire O'Neill was at the time a fairly new minister. I think she'd been sworn in August or something like that, and this all started kicking off September, October, right? And the wheels started rolling. So she was pretty new. Thrown into the fire, really, from the start. But that treated a lot of things like 2030 strategy, and a lot of things I think got moved and fast tracked. So I think you're right to a degree. We do think that in the industry and go, shit, this has got to be the one that makes the biggest difference. But as Tom and I have witnessed, and we've spoken about, sort of off air, is that when you look at the election that's coming up in Australia, like, I mean, we're sitting here in January, toward the end of January, and 2025, an election looks like it'll probably happen in April, maybe early April or something like that. And this is just, crystal balling at the moment. But, in the straw polls that Tom and I have witnessed in the Labor Party, it's not a top of mind topic at the moment, probably because of those reasons. And therefore, Claire O'Neill did get shuffled across. Tony Burke is the minister, and Andrew Charlton is the envoy in that situation. But it's not really being pushed as an election issue because of cost of living and all those sorts of things. And cost of living, I'm not saying it's not important, and inflation, etc. But the way to fuck up cost of living is to get a cyber attack, right? They can really move the needle on cost of living pretty quickly. So I think it still needs to be in the conversation, but it does get some sort of tokenism sometimes, and often when an attack happens, it becomes front of mind. So that's the sort of conundrum that we sit in this space, is that in places where, as critical infrastructure like the SOCI Act and different things that come into play, people play ball because they have to. But the general populace in Australia, as coming from the UK, is a very "she'll be right, mate" sort of attitude. So, I think a lot of people sat back and went, "Oh, I didn't really get that badly affected." I mean, I might have had to go change my driver's license number, or do a couple of little things, but I didn't really lose anything. I didn't lose any money or anything like that. My identity stuffed, and it's all out there on the dark web. But besides that, I can't see any effect, right? So this is the thing that we've got to keep in play. So Tommy?
And look, first of all, you mentioned elections, and it gives me, it stresses me out, like having covered 6 election campaigns. It's just endless. Anyway, but what I think is really, really important about this part of the conversation is this cultural part. So I shared something that I found earlier in the week, and it seems to me that this is just repeating over and over again, that there's a hit of awareness. There's sometimes multiple stories, and in a few cases, a few days worth of stories. But the general thing is that something pops up, it gets 1 or 2 stories, just disappears. It is not top of mind. As Jason said, the focus polling they're doing, it's not a top 10 issue for either party, despite the consequence. So what I think is really interesting, though, is how it's percolating through our legislative and regulative system. So we've had updates to the laws in Parliament. In WA, last week, there was a precedent set. So a company, Mobius, basically the CEO just had a fake email sent, $235,400 worth of invoices that were sent to the hacker. And Innotech is a big mining company. And then the end result is it's come back down onto Mobius to pay. The responsibility is that they didn't have the basic cybersecurity in place. Therefore, they own the responsibility. It was the CEO of the company where the mistake happened. So this is an executive targeting attack. It's something that there's so much conversation in the cybersecurity world, so much visibility given to it. Yet, one story in the ABC, I've been looking the rest of the week. I did a search before this. I haven't found anything else. So it's just, why isn't it grabbing people's attention? Just a question for both of you, what you might think, and what's some radical thing we need to do other than a hack to kind of, rather than shaking people, to get this as a top of mind priority.
I think I was going to say the news cycle is probably too short at the moment. Like if you think about the Trump inauguration, we had the wildfires over in LA. The news and obviously this peace agreement that's happened, between Hamas and Israel, and these are pretty big stories, right, worldwide. And something like that, and that quantum of money, people are like, oh well, so it's this news cycle. And remember when Optus and all those things were happening, they were front line, it's affecting these people. This state's having this issue. This has happened to that person, like looking for the stories and sort of unraveling that. And I think if you can connect it to the average Australian and how it affects the battler, the Aussie battler, like something like that, that seems to resonate a bit more. But still, the news cycle moves so quickly, and people's attention is shifting, especially with social media, and that it's happening so quickly that what's the next best thing that we can get into? Oh shit, the wildfires on LA, and then it's say the tensions in the Middle East, and then it's the inauguration of Trump, and it's all these things to people are bigger and more important. And it's whatever the news, as Tommy, with your background, working in the newsroom at SBS or running that as you did for a long period of time, is that people looking for the next best hit. What's the next sugar hit? What's the next thing? What's going to push more ads? What's that's where the attention seems to be fixated and focused. Yeah, it's not really on the core issue, But Reece, I'd be interested in your thoughts. But I think that's my 2 cents worth.
I agree. I think the news cycle is partly to blame. Optus, Medibank, Latitude, these types of organisations, it's really a catch-22 because I think they will catch headlines because they're big enterprise organizations, they have a big consumer customer base.
Well, pretty much each one of those, mate, was over 10 million people, and when you think of a population that's just tipped over 27 million, that's a large amount of people, right? And you think some people were caught up in all of those, so it's information spread from each one of those attacks, right? So it's a lot of information out there, and on a per capita basis, if you look at some of the data that comes out, or the data, it is actually shown that Australia per capita has more information about its citizens out there than any other country. And due mainly and in part to those attacks. So it is still a key issue, but it's still, as I say, being swept under the rug a bit. And what's next?
Yeah, but I think also partly the issue as well is that those organisations don't resonate with most of the other small to mid-sized organisations or enterprises within Australia, because I think there was a stat it was a publication from Microsoft, I think quite recently, and they said, I can't remember the exact percentage, but it was a pretty high percentage of organisations surveyed that believe either one, that they're too small to be attacked, and this was, I think, one of those organisations below, let's say 250, so up to 250 employees. And then there was also a scarily high percentage that said, I've been attacked once, so I won't get attacked again. And so that's why it's not front of mind, right? And so it's, I just think these headline organizations like Optus, Medibank, Latitude, or critical infrastructure, they don't resonate with the rest of the population, and so we need more stories like Mobius that you mentioned, Tom, or those small to mid-sized organizations that are paying, because small to mid-sized organizations, though the dollar figure may not be as large in terms of impact as Optus or Medibank, actually they are being disproportionately affected. Like that could be someone's lifeline,
Yeah, as a percentage of business, it's a lot higher.
Yeah.
And there's just a storytelling part in the way this information is both being shared and absorbed as well. It's really quite fascinating. So when, we've been in the newsroom, SBS Alpha Parley House, the call in the morning about what you're going to do, the first thing you would do is start to look for a case study. So who's experiencing this? And so with Optus and Medibank, it was like you were able to find a whole bunch of individuals that had their data stolen and were incredibly stressed about the potential impact of that. So then you put them on screen and people empathize with them.
Yeah.
But this other story people aren't empathizing with, but there's a lot of valuable information in there. And to be honest with you, I imagine that, if you get hacked, you have a similar sized business, the first time you'll come in contact with this is when your lawyer comes in and says, actually, there's a precedent's been set in the WA court, so you're completely liable now. So it's kind of, I don't know, the way it's percolating, I know it's very new, cyber and all that kind of stuff, but the way it's slowly percolating through our society, there's a real cultural challenge there. And it's just not kind of hitting the mark, the slip, slops up, all that kind of stuff yet. But anyway, it's something that we're kind of, we're really chasing down. So look, again, I kind of touched on looking forward for 2025, but what is about Huntress Labs? Where's the opportunities for you guys? Where do you think the opportunities are? Is it the SMB 1001 for small to medium businesses and enterprises? Just kind of like, tell us a bit about what you'd be doing if you were a CEO or a co-founder of a business around that size in 2025.
Well, certainly, look, I think for Huntress, our mission statement is to protect the 99%, right? So that's to make sure that organizations outside of that 1% of enterprise, have security expertise and capability to protect their business. So that's always going to be our mission. We will work as closely with partners as we possibly can to enable them to deliver those services into that SME segment, because that's how you do it at scale. We can't reach, I don't know how, 2 million or however many small to mid-sized organizations there are in Australia. We can't reach them all.
8.8 million, I think.
Yeah. I think organizations should look at something like SMB 1001, because it is it's a starting point, but it's a progressive standard. You can over time become more cyber resilient, but also I think one of the big benefits which a lot of security frameworks don't provide is a tangible outcome, which is that certificate that you can put on your website. You can demonstrate to your supply chain that, hey, I'm protected to this degree, and so that becomes a competitive advantage. So I would be, and I think it's only a matter of time before we start to see some more, cyber requirements throughout the supply chain within Australia. And so I think those that are on the front foot and have or aligned to something like SMB 1001, it then becomes a competitive advantage for that organization.
Yeah,
So
you're right on that, because that's something that I've noticed actually in feeds like on LinkedIn and stuff, that the people are saying, like, I've got a bronze certificate or we've gone to gold.
yeah,
And I know a lot of MSPs are now saying that they want to get all of their clients. I've been having a lot of chats recently, all their clients up to gold standard. I know one that had 1,700 clients that I was speaking to last week, and he said we're getting all 1,700 to gold level. And I know the SMB IT, like there's a group of small business IT professionals.
yeah,
To be a member, you need to be gold at least, before you go in there. And I know one of them, who Tom and I been speaking with recently, Luke, is going to diamond standard, right? Like in the business. So I think
yeah,
you're right. Is if you're going to compare businesses and you're going to have people that are going to be looking after any form of your information or anything like that, the higher they are on that standard, the more comfort you're probably going to get, aren't you, from actually dealing with that company, that you're going to be more secure, because a lot of these third party attacks are a way in and a way that people do get attacked. So if we can in that supply chain, as you say, Reece, get some level of protection and know that people are trying to do the best they can through there, it's going to give you as a customer a level of comfort and that you're dealing with someone who actually not only takes care of their business, but obviously take care of themselves and their customers. And that's a key thing in this day and age, I think.
Yeah, I think conversely as well, if you were to get breached and you had customer data being leaked, the brand impact or damage to that within the market is or can be significant.
I got one last one for both of you. So this week, there's stories leaking out about OpenAI are about to release PhD level reasoning and analytics and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, the phishing campaigns, this ability, it's got more complex. The ability to cross culture and language and be able to kind of imitate this. What does this mean now?
Hang on, Tommy. Hang on. Are you saying that now chat's going to be at the same level of intelligence as you? Is that what I'm
I
hearing?
don't have a PhD, so I think it's going to be in front of me, Jason.
Okay.
I think it might be in front of all of us.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be at Tom level. So okay, that's
Yeah, so smarter than me, bloody hell. Anyway, but in the hands of the wrong people, it just gets easier and easier to trick people. So again, this race is on. Do you think the speed at which, and I'd love both of you to answer this, that these AI evolutions or generative AI, like machine learning in disguise, evolutions are coming out, is going to mean it's really, really hard to adapt the culture in somewhere like Australia in order to keep up and teach people to protect themselves?
Look, AI is going to benefit attackers and adversaries quicker or more, more so than defenders to begin with, and it's going to be difficult, I think, particularly from a social engineering perspective, to keep up with some of the stuff that AI can do now. I think actually it may be, and again this goes back to your point before, Jason, about do we need another attack for there to drive culture? I think actually with AI.
that was your point, Reece. Hang on. That was your point. I was picking up your point. You said it surreptitiously, but I actually picked it up. Yeah.
We might need to edit that bit out, I think.
We'll keep that in.
But
no way to stop.
I think as AI like security attacks affect more and more individuals and organisations, I think that might help actually build more of a culture. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Jason.
I think we're still in the middle of it, right? So it's always hard when you're in the midst of something to actually pick what's going to happen, right? I remember the Y2K. I mean, Tom and I are old enough to remember, the Y2K and when that was going to come. That as soon as we ticked over to 2000, the world was going to end and all those sorts of things, and it feels like in a way we've sort of got a bit of that at the moment as well. But I agree. Look, and knowing from the attacking side, they do work more collaboratively than what we do on this side. We could learn a lot of lessons from the dark side of the web on how to collaborate and work together. As soon as they find something that works, they're sharing that, right? As soon as we find something that works here, we're turning it into a product and telling everyone else to get fucked. It's like, that's my product. I came up with that idea, right? No one else can touch it. Now you can try and work it out yourself. The other side is, hey, I've worked this out. I've got this great phishing or social engineering kit, or this is my business email compromise stuff. You can buy it from me, and I'll take a cut and all that sort of stuff, and let's share the goodness and sort of bring all that together, right? So that's always going to be the case, that they are better at that, but that's what we've got to get better at. And this is the whole thing, like one of the other things, besides Tommy and I, nailing it away with Murph and, with the Australian Cyber Network, that's something we're trying to bring, is that collaboration. And the first piece of work that came up was, a professionalisation scheme and grant, which is, causing a kerfuffle in itself, and always does, because people never look at the real detail of what's actually trying to happen. So everyone's in there to try and take pot shots. But the first opportunity you get to try and do something collaboratively and working together, what happens? Everyone scatters off in their own little groups and goes to try and work it out by themselves, and this is the issue we have. So it doesn't matter if it's AI or anything. The more you are separated and separated apart from actually trying to solve something, the more difficult it becomes, So I think, with the connection that we have in the world, and especially if you look at science, and some of the scientific breakthroughs that have happened because, scientists all around the world have been able to share data and activities with each other, in real time often. And that's actually fast-tracked a lot of development in the scientific field. But yet on something as important as cybersecurity, we're still yet to find a really good mix where we can have all people moving together. I don't know, we have separation, with people always blaming China or Russia or, North Korea or whatever the case may be, or, parts of the Middle East like Iran and stuff. There's always targeting and saying there's separate people and they're all working together and we've got to work against them and stuff. But within the industry itself, you'll find that, in defence here in Australia, they won't buy Israeli product, or, there's even on the good side of the fence, when people are trying to do the right thing, there is still blocks and roadblocks in it. And while that's still the case, I think we're always going to struggle with any facet of cybersecurity, not just from a machine learning and AI point of view, but just across the board. We're always going to be a step or two behind the attackers, because we're just not working together to try and solve these problems often, And I think, even if we look at the SMB 1001, which we've spoken about a lot here, but that was a standard we built originally for Claire O'Neill sort of put out when she was Minister for Cyber, a health check for Australian businesses, and sort of creating something around that. Once she sort of moved on, and it was sort of like dead space, Pete and Ryan and the crew said, international standard, right? Dynamic standards international, and the want for it and need for it around the world is there, fit for purpose, can work through any sort of channel like MSPs or MSSPs and stuff like that, be handheld through help businesses, right? So it's more of a collaborative thing. And I think you look at the steering committee we put together for that, from all parts of business. So when you put it out there, no one else can go, oh, we weren't involved in that. We pretty much got everyone around the table, all the major bodies, all that sort of thing. So if we can get that happening in as many areas of cyber as possible and get as many people to the table to agree on things and move things forward, that's what's really going to move the needle, I think, for cyber and help protect all of us, against these persistent threats.
100%. And, look, if you're involved in any of these things, you can have a voice in the way it's shaped. If you're just going to shout from the sidelines, it's going to run past you. It's inevitable.
Yeah.
Like, change is inevitable.
Stake your fist at the sky.
Yeah.
Doesn't change anything, guys.
Well, look, in wrapping up, look, there's just a little story, and Jason prompted this in the Y2K. So I was at Channel 10, and about 3 months before 2000 ticked over, we were chatting to the head engineer, was this little bearded guy who spit roast bloody pigs all the weekend and stuff. He's like, all right, let's figure this out. Found a couple of computers, set the clocks forward, and then we just watched them tick over and keep going, right? And so kind of, through a bit of, proactive, like experimentation, it literally just removed the issue for the entire network. Oh, we've tested it, works fine, don't worry about it.
It sounded like you're Michael J. Fox.
He kept doing stories, but like, right up to the wire.
The DeLorean.
How many
88 miles an hour.
Anyway, look, thank you both for joining us. It's been a fantastic episode. Listeners, you can find Reece on LinkedIn, Reece Appleton. Follow Huntress Labs as well to see what they're up to. Fantastic conversation today. Thank you both for joining us.
Appreciate
it.
Thanks,
Tommy, and thanks, Reece. Good work, mate. Well done.
Yeah, good conversation, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you.